We have since July last year been requesting that our expert has access to data records, a request that has been repeatedly rebuffed on grounds of cost and the work involved. But why was the Post Office refusing to provide Mrs. Misra's defence expert with access to audit data?
I don't know now, but I certainly, it was out of my hands.
You knew that the only way to test whether a problem had arisen at a particular office was for a detailed analysis to be undertaken of the relevant transaction logs, the audit data at a particular branch. To test whether a problem has arisen at a particular office is for a detailed analysis of the relevant transaction logs to be undertaken, as happened in Misra case. That's an answer to a different question. Do you accept that time and expense is not a reason?
No, it's no reason
to not obtain the data.
Not when somebody's liberty is at stake, and the other things I read from the impact statements, no.
The simple answer is that without retrieving the logs, everyone is speculating. So again, the Defence Solicitor was asking, the head of legal for the firm that developed and operated the system was asking, and Mr. Jenkins, the proposed witness, was asking for the logs, the ARQ data, to be obtained. But why hadn't it happened by now?
So we're going to jump back into Jarnail Singh's testimony to the Post Office Horizon IT inquiry, and he's not able to say why he didn't request the data in a number of cases, 4 which have been highlighted to him, and the 5th being Seema Misra's case that he was involved in. As he says in an email later on, that actually that's the only way they can really prove whether there's an issue with the system at all, or whether there's actually been a loss indeed. He says that it wasn't requesting, it was a Post Office decision due to time and money, but he does say he understands that that wasn't a valid reason, so why didn't he halt the prosecution? Not only that, the Defence Counsel were asking for the audit data, the Fujitsu head of legal advised Jarnail Singh to ask for the data, and also Gareth Jenkins, their star witness at the time, asked them to request the data, otherwise it's all just speculation. So how does he explain this? Let's jump into the inquiry.
Can we look, please, at UKGI 0014895, please? It's an email from the Defence Solicitor, Izzy Hogg, to you, saying we refer to Judge Critchlow's order. There's a problem with their office system. We enclose a request for disclosure, third paragraph. We note that your response makes a suggestion that our expert meets with your investigating officer and representatives of Fujitsu. Can we endorse that and emphasise that we have since July last year been requesting that our expert has access to data records, a request that has been repeatedly rebuffed on grounds of cost and the work involved. But why was the Post Office refusing to provide Mrs. Misra's defence expert with access to audit data?
I don't know now, but I certainly, it was out of my hands. I think I did as much as I could, but then it was that contractual, commercial relationship that the Post Office had with Fujitsu, but it wasn't something that I didn't want or obstructing. I mean, obviously, I'm the lawyer in the case. I did all I could to progress it, help it along. But it was...
You knew that the only way to test whether a problem had arisen at a particular office was for a detailed analysis to be undertaken of the relevant transaction logs, the audit data at a particular branch, didn't you?
Yes, I accept that. But I mean, it was not lack of trying and not obtaining it. I wanted to obtain it. I mean, I think if you go back, I don't know, September, October, November, the first thing I did was to actually copied in the investigation and say, look, this is what the defence want to disclose. This is their inquiries. Please deal with it. And then I think subsequently the matters transpired. It did.
And if we fast forward a couple of years, 3 years or so, to poll 3060974 and look at page 3, please. I'm sorry, it's the bottom of page 2. We scroll down, please. 4 lines up from the bottom. You say the only way to test whether a problem has arisen at a particular office is for a detailed analysis of the relevant transaction logs to be undertaken, as happened in the Misra case. And then over the page, I imagine the independent inquiry will be examining some, perhaps all of the cases on Second Sight's requested schedule. In none of these cases were the transaction logs ever examined, ? This is time-consuming, expensive, though it may be the only way to investigate the concerns raised by these former subpostmasters. So you knew that the only way to test whether a problem had arisen at a branch was for a detailed analysis of the transaction logs, didn't you?
Well, I said so, black and white.
So if that was the only way to test whether there were horizon issues at a branch, why wasn't that obtained in each investigation and in each prosecution case?
As a previous, that's the way the post office operated. That's the way they dealt with it, like I previously advised, as I previously told you.
So essentially you're saying I didn't do my job properly because there was contractual limits between Fujitsu and the post office. Well, surely you have to escalate that higher and say I can't compromise my professional obligations because you've signed a dodgy contract that doesn't allow us to request all the data that we needed, or you're not willing to pay for it. That is ridiculous to suggest.
Do you accept that expense and time is not a sufficient reason to obtain the audit data if it was the only way to determine whether there were problems at a branch?
The expense and the time-consuming bit didn't affect me at all. I wanted it, but
that's an answer to a different question. Do you accept that time and expense is not a reason?
No, it's no reason
to not obtain the data.
Not when somebody's liberty is at stake, and the other things I read from the impact statements. No.
Okay, we'll go.
It's a shame that he didn't take that view at the time, isn't it? Otherwise, we might not have had to be here.
Back to the story then, back in February 2010, yes. FUJ 0012 2713. We've looked at the defence requests already for disclosure from Izzy Hogg of audit data. Can we look now, please, at an email to you from David Jones? If we just scroll down a little bit further. Thank you. You can see he's the head of legal in Fujitsu.
Yeah.
If we scroll up, we can see the date of this, February 2010. Jarnail, thanks for your email. I met this morning with Gareth Jenkins, who came back into the office briefly to meet with me. Gareth will help with this matter. Next paragraph, attached is a first draft of statement from Gareth. As you will see, next paragraph, you will see that there are some areas where Fujitsu cannot deal with the defendant's expert's criticism as they're about polls, procedures, or requirements, and it seems evident there'll be need for a poll internal expert who can work with Gareth to deal with these areas. And then this. One concern is that the Post Office Limited have not apparently requested transaction data for West Byfleet for the period and transactions in question. This would normally be provided in previous cases and would include Fujitsu extracting log files from the system to enable us to provide details of transactions. Surprisingly, this has not been requested in this case. Perhaps you would consider the need for this.
So even Fujitsu at this stage are surprised at Jarnail Singh's, or the post office more generally, lack of request for the exact data that would prove that there was an actual loss at the branch in the first place. So it's not just, we can look back on it in hindsight. He was literally even directly told this by the head of legal at Fujitsu.
So it wasn't just the defence that were saying to you that you need to obtain the audit data. It was the people who developed, operated and ran the system were telling you it too, weren't they?
Yes. There's no dispute about that. Yes, of course. You need them. It's essential. It's a must.
Was audit data ever requested before a person was suspended or dismissed?
I don't know. That's some question for the investigation team. I didn't get involved in that.
Did you ever see a case in which audit data was obtained before a person was suspended or dismissed?
As I said to you, the legal team saw the investigation file. What happened prior to it didn't. I can't say.
Was audit data ever obtained before the file was submitted to you for advice?
I don't know.
Did you ever see an advice file that contained audit data where you were asked to advise on evidential sufficiency, i.e. before the lawyer was asked to advise?
Not any of my files, no.
And is the answer to the question I was about to ask why the same as before? It's because we didn't do it that way?
Yeah. Are you asking specifically about Mrs. Misra's here, or are you asking generally?
Generally.
Yeah. You read the papers. That's what it is.
So we didn't ask for the key piece of evidence to prove a crime had even taken place before launching prosecutions against innocent subpostmasters. Wow.
Can we move forwards, please, to FUJ 0012 2735? This is the same day Mr. Jones, head of legal at Fujitsu, forwarding you an email from Mr. Jenkins saying, please see attached and Gareth's comments on the need for an examination of the underlying log files and timing of this. If we scroll down, please. Mr. Jenkins said, the simple answer is that without retrieving the logs, everyone is speculating. And as discussed this morning, nobody has bothered to ask us for any logs. At this stage, it's not at all clear what transactions are thought to be missing at what time or even in what time period. Analysing logs over a long period is very, very time consuming. This is not going to happen by Monday.
So now, I mean, he is discredited, even though he's saying he's a distinguished engineer and applications architect on the Royal Mail Group of Fujitsu. But Gareth Jenkins is saying, you're just speculating, we need the logs. The head of legal, David Jones, is saying, you need the logs. The defence team is saying, you need the logs. And still, the Post Office's response to this is, well, that's not how we do it here. Yeah, well, it is how you should be doing it there, or you shouldn't bother launching the prosecutions.
So again, the defence solicitor was asking, the head of legal for the firm that developed and operated the system was asking, and Mr. Jenkins, the proposed witness, was asking for the logs, the ARQ data, to be obtained. But why hadn't it happened by now?
Well, I think you got the emails. I certainly requested it. It's a really internal matter for the other departments. I think if you from the emails you've provided me with, there's a lot of emails which I'm not copied into, whereby the head of Fujitsu Legal, David Jones, is having conversations about that with the commercial and contract teams of the Post Office, and I think at the same time the investigation officer is all he can to get authority. And I think when we do obtain authority, we got Penny Thomas, who is the prosecution support team, who the Fujitsu work with the Post Office, asking it got to be done in a certain way by a certain person within the Post Office. So that's where the answer is. It's not because I don't want it or didn't request it. It's the way the whole system operated.
So it sounds like it was on the too hard to do pile, basically.
Can we see what you did when you were confronted with this three-pronged request? Defence Solicitor, Fujitsu and Mr. Jenkins. FUJ 0015-2957. And look at page 2, please. I should just look at the page 1 so you can see the date of this and scroll down. That's it, 8th. Scroll down a little bit more. Yeah, your email, your secretary on behalf of you, to David Jones, 8th of February. We've just been looking at email exchanges of the 5th of February, so we're 3 days later now. Over the page, please. You say, 4th paragraph, we're keen that the defence are given suggestions as to how they can efficiently test their theories against the Horizon data. We do not want them to say they will not have time before the trial. We anticipate that it would not be very difficult to test their theories against a short but, I think that's supposed to be representative, is that right?
Yeah, but representative, yeah.
But representative span of data. For example, from the months when Mrs. Misra has admitted false accounting, 15th of November to the 14th of December 06, 16th of May to the 16th of June 07, 14th of November 07 to the 15th of December 07, and 9th of January 2008.
Well, that still seems like asking for months of data, which they say isn't possible, but is this him trying to possibly find a workaround and say, no, we're not going to request the data, but can you just test these theories against this data, maybe in an attempt to avoid requesting it and then avoid the contractual limits and fees potentially?
It'd be helpful if Mr. Jenkins could consider practical and efficient ways in which the defence might be able to test their theories. So you said that the Post Office essentially was keen for a short but representative span of data. But where did you get these dates from?
Oh, but I'm now working with the barrister in the case. I'm conscious of the fact, the complexity of the case. So what I'm doing is two things. Firstly, saying, look, this is where we are. What do we do? And I think his advice has been, well, let them start with this. And that's more or less what I've asked.
So where did you, these dates seem to be dates for the months in respect of which Mrs. Misra admitted to false accounting.
I think.
What was the relevance of those months?
I don't know. I mean, I'm looking, The problem I have today is that, or generally has been, is to because I can't go back in time. I mean, at that time, obviously, I had a lot more detail, a lot more information as to where we are. Today, I can't give an explanation as to where I got the dates, but certainly, it would have been from advice and discussions with the trial, the barrister who'd been briefed or instructed on that, because that's the way I worked.
All this could have been avoided, though, and all this time pressure could have been avoided by actually just requesting the transaction logs when you were bringing the case. I mean, to be fair to him, somebody could have requested it before in the investigation team, but that's now come back to bite them, really. And essentially now, it seems like they want to not request the data, but cherry-pick data that supports, presumably, their case against Mrs. Misra.
I always, before I'm making these sort of decisions, I would always get a formulated, constructive advice before I move forward. And I was given those dates, say, well, this would be helpful, and suggest that, and I did.
So do you think you got those from Mr. Tatford?
Yes.